Hello and welcome to the GW Book Club, where I am joined by my good friend Stu to chat about classic Warhammer fiction. This time, we have got something a little bit special. It's a couple of festive stories. One is in the Warhammer world, but also not quite. And the other one is nothing to do with Warhammer other than its author, Kim Newman, who is a classic Warhammer author, one of the best. We're going to get into both of those stories very shortly. But Stu, how are you doing on this festive evening?
Really festive, as you can see, with the Christmas hat and all the decorations behind me.
I was going to wear my festive
It is
hat,
December at least.
Yeah, I've got a little elf hat with the bell, but it just keeps ringing. It's very irritating. So I've decided not to wear it this year.
My kids had their Christmas dinner at school today, and they're allowed to wear Christmas jumpers. And then my wife had got out all these extra things like hats and stuff. And as they were leaving today, do you want to take the hats and things? And they were like, no. Boys after my own heart. It's not silly hat time.
People will have to believe us that it's Christmas, even though there's no decorations around us. It is Christmas time. We haven't recorded this in the height of summer and just kept hold of it for months. But we did decide to start our Christmas period with these two really interesting stories. So we're going to be talking soon about Kim Newman's A Christmas Ghost Story. So this is a contemporary ghost story that is inspired by classic BBC ghost stories for Christmas. That is a fun story. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, we've got a very interesting, like an oddity of almost GW Books history. So folks will probably remember that one of the big releases during the GW Books era, so this is between 89 and 91 in Games Workshop history, was Konrad and the Konrad trilogy, right? By David Ferring, which is actually David Garnett writing as David Ferring. There were 3 books in that series. 2 of them were published during the original GW Books run, but then the third and final part of the trilogy didn't come out until a couple of years later, when Box Tree were brought in as a licensee to continue the cancelled Games Workshop book publishing project. And then, out of nowhere, a number of years later, there is a short story by David Ferring in this collection of Michael Moorcock-related short stories. So this is Pawn of Chaos, Tales of the Eternal Champion. So this is about the Michael Moorcock universe with Elric and Hawkmoon and all of those characters. And this is published by White Wolf. So a completely different game company to Games Workshop. But there's a story in here about Konrad, right? Which is incredible to me. So it is called A Festive Season, or The Festive Season. It's by David Ferring. It features Konrad. It features other characters from the Warhammer world. It's set in Prague, and it is described as the Warhammer World's Prague. It is a Warhammer Christmas story, an official Warhammer Christmas story. It's copyright Games Workshop, if you look inside the liner notes as well. But it is not published by Games Workshop. I was astonished when I found this, when I was told about this. Incredible stuff.
It wouldn't happen now.
No, it definitely wouldn't happen
now. It probably would now, actually, under license soon. Maybe it would.
yeah, maybe. There'd be a video game of it. But yeah, so I was marveling at the very fact of this story's existence before even reading it. But then the story itself is actually, I thought, like a really fun little treat. We get this odd adventure that Konrad has during a sort of earlier portion of his life in the trilogy, where he goes to Prague for work, buys some odd little Christmas toys that turn out to be cursed and try and take over the city. Very simple, a very sort of fun and whimsical sort of Christmassy story. I mean, what did you think overall of it, Stu? What was your impressions?
It's fine. I think before we started recording, I called it unremarkable. It's absolute, and that probably seems a little bit harsh on reflection. It's absolutely fine. It's fun. It's an easy read, and it has it feels Warhammer, which maybe is a bit of the criticism of some of the other Konrad stuff that goes off on weird tangents. Whereas this is absolutely fine for what it does. You
Yeah.
got a festive theme, you've got a narrative and a reason for him and his crew of mercenaries for being where they are. It's atmospheric. There's some lots of funny little jokes in it. Some aimed at real life as well. Some little quips and things I
Yeah.
thought they were quite funny. And it's fine, absolutely fine. I enjoyed reading it, and I enjoyed reading a Conrad story that felt like it wasn't going to go off and not tell the end. So it was fine. What I mean unremarkable, I just meant it's not a kind of wow, oh my god, you've got to go read this. This is great. I wish this
Mm,
was a full story kind of thing. That's what I mean by unremarkable, as in other
sure.
than "Bleh, it's not very good."
Yeah. I had a lot more fun than you did with this story. So folks may remember that, we've covered the first two books in the Conrad series we covered in the book club previously. So that's Conrad and Shadow Breed. I had a lot of time for that first Conrad book. I think it set up a load of really interesting ideas. I thought it was a fun, pulpy fantasy adventure. But then I didn't enjoy Shadow Breed quite so much because that kind of didn't follow any of its own setup. You had all of these questions and all these cool ideas, and
Yeah,
interesting, intriguing things that were just kind of put to one side, and you had a completely different story. And it was a bit repetitive, I thought, Shadow Breed. I've also now read Warblade, which is the final part of the series, which again sort of followed that Shadow Breed approach of just discovering the story as it went, which kind of it wasn't
mm,
as satisfying to me. I kind of felt like all these cool ideas and questions that were asked in the first book, they just weren't resolved by the end. So I went into this story with probably pretty low expectations, but it really surprised me because it was light and it was fun and it just kind of wanted to be a silly fantasy story, Christmas story. And in order to do that, it kind of felt like there was no expectation in the way that you had with those two sequels, where you kind of like it just kept on piling on questions and unresolved characters and have incomplete arcs. So all of the later Conrad trilogy was just weighed down with these difficult things. Whereas this
yeah,
story was just an adventure he had once. Doesn't have to be really clever, it doesn't have to tie into a lot of stuff. It can just be he went to Prague and had a fun time, which I quite liked. And yeah, it did feel festive and it did feel Warhammery to me. I think,
yes, yeah. I mean, it's uncomplicated, isn't it? And that's in the nature of the brief, I imagine, as much as that it's separate from the main story arc, which definitely wasn't uncomplicated.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's an interesting one because I believe it was originally requested by Brian Ansell. It was going to be for White Dwarf in a Christmas
Hmm.
issue. For whatever reason, it was not published. Obviously, it then later found its way. David Ferring was doing work with White Wolf, so presumably some deal was then struck in order to finally get it released. So I think whether or not this was in the original treatment or if this was changed because it was in this collection of Michael Moorcock stuff, Elric is present. So the
Yeah,
hero, the eternal champion of Michael Moorcock's stories, um, is actually is kind of never called by name, but is present as this kind of albino stranger, this wanderer at the gates, and you see them a couple of times, and there's enough there for it to, it's very transparently is Elric. But that's that's quite fun because that canonizes in a way Elric in the Warhammer world, which I think is cool. Or you could be like, oh no, actually, it could just be an elf character, or Dan Abnett's Gilead, who is
yeah,
quite Elric esque. It could just be him. So there's this wiggle room there, but I do think that's fun because you have this kind of closed loop of Warhammer is hugely inspired by Michael Moorcock stuff, and then through this bizarre chain of publishing events, Elric ends up in the Warhammer world, which is quite fun.
It is fun. It is fun and undeniable enough that they
Yeah,
can get away with it, I suppose. But yeah,
yeah,
it's. I think maybe that's what's more fun about this than. Again, this is going to sound harsher than I mean. Than the actual story is the fact. The most interesting points around this is where it's published and little things like that.
sure.
And some of the other little nods and things like there's a play on in Prague at the time. It's a Detlef Sierck play,
Yeah,
a midwinter night's scream, and there's lots of little bits like that. I mean, the character that sells the little dolls is it was his Pappenheim, I think his
yeah,
name is,
something like
isn't
that.
it?
Yeah,
And then he describes wearing some kind of, he's a bit like Santa, but it's like a red leather Santa. It's a bit like some creepy, very creepy Santa going
he's
on there.
creepy Santa. Yeah, yeah.
He's creepy Santa, but it's fun. It is fun. I wonder whether, without the connections and the history, how I would feel about it as a short, because
Sure.
it's definitely added an element of excitement or interest
Yeah,
to
I
it.
think that's true. But I think, and that's kind of in a good way because it kind of hews sort of closer to like a Kim Newman style story. There's elements of
Yeah.
Kim Newman's writing where he would be referencing a load of other characters and sort of borrowing characters and referring to stuff, taking a bit of inspiration. I mean, yeah, Detlef Sierck is in there. There's a joke about Orfeo in the underworld, which I thought was very fun.
Yes.
So that's quite good. There is Elvis,
Elvis.
the character who may or may not be immortal, may or may not be a vampire. That's kind of silly and funny. I thought that was quite good. But then there's also Hallam, the mercenary,
Yeah.
which is another really interesting kind of like odd connection to GW books past because Hallam as a character was slated to appear in one of the Nicola Griffith stories that was going to take place
Hmm.
in Albion. So there's a whole unwritten or at least unreleased sort of element of that early GW books Warhammer world where Albion leads back into the old world through this character of Hallam, who you would have followed on an adventure, who crossed over with a load of other characters as well from Griffith's previous stories. So you kind of get this. This is the only appearance of Hallam in any of the actual texts that have ever been published, I think, and that's
Hmm.
quite interesting. This character who sort of has a whole history that we will never get to read, which is just fascinating to me. So that is quite nice. And I get what you're saying around like, is it more like did I get a thrill and enjoyment because I'm like, oh wow, there's Hallam from this thing that I know about, and there's Elric, which and he shouldn't be here. That's cool, and all of these sort of weird. It's just pop culture trivia in the form of
Hmm.
a story, and I think yes, that I'm guilty of that. I think, but I also think that the story itself, which we've alluded to, of so he's Konrad has come to Prague. It's basically about a load of scenes of him kind of talking to Hallam and talking to the people of Prague. He buys these or gets hold of these little miniatures from Creepy Santa. And this guy's clearly creepy. He's clearly going around. He's selling everyone these little toys, these little toy soldiers. And then overnight, the toy soldiers come to life and start attacking people. It's a little bit gremlins, basically, or
Yeah.
small soldiers.
Yeah.
Um, and then it kind of gets resolved. I think in terms of the story, like in terms of that, I was like, yeah, it's obviously it's testing the boundaries of like, of being a bit too silly for the Warhammer world. But because of the
Yeah.
whimsy and the Christmas setting, I was kind of okay with it. I was willing to let it go. If I had an issue with the story, it is that it just ends. It does just get resolved. I think it kind of feels like the word count was running out a little bit. You have all of this expansive early stuff, like the first and second acts are like really nice and kind of there's loads of room to breathe where you just get to spend time with Konrad being a character, which is something he wasn't as often in his own trilogy, ironically enough. So you get to see Konrad being like a character with thoughts and feelings and having conversations. You get to see this guy Hallam. You get to see Prague from a different perspective. All of that's cool. And then the the toys come to life, and then it's just like, right, the whole city's got to kill the toys, and then that's it. It's like that's it. So I
It's
thought that
like
was a
raise the
shame.
alarm, raise
Yeah,
the alarm, and it was fine.
yeah,
Everyone sorted it out, and
yeah,
luckily, not too many kids died because they had toys hadn't been given to them yet, but a few parents did. Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm sure
exactly.
that's made the kids happy, isn't it? What did you get for Christmas? I'm an orphan. But yeah, it was pretty abrupt, wasn't it, at
It
the
was.
end? But
Yeah, which
but
I think is a shame. I think, I personally would have been happy with another few pages just for a
mm,
bit more of a like, maybe a bit more of a resolution to like Creepy Santa and his deal and how Konrad did, how did he raise the alarm? It just kind of says, he sort of rushes out and does some stuff and the alarm gets raised. I would like a bit more, but ultimately, it's a short story. It's an oddity that shouldn't exist, but does, which is cool. And it's chock full of all of these nice little references and stuff. There was more than enough in it for me personally to like get a lot of enjoyment from it and to justify having bought this book specifically for it. So I came away a winner. I came away feeling like, you know what? It's a good purchase. Well done. I'm happy to have it in the collection now. So yeah.
it was good. It was good fun. It was good fun.
It was fun. It was fun. I think it was fun. And it ranks up alongside the first Konrad book for me. It's Konrad, and then A Festive Season, and then the other two books, like in terms of my enjoyment of that. And yeah, I'm happy to have this as part of my GW books collection, despite all of its weird and wonderful journey to existing at all. So yeah, it's great. um, Anything else that you wanted to say about Festive Story, Festive Season?
No, I think we've covered it. I think we've covered it. Definitely, if people got the opportunity to go out and read it, it's not easy to get hold of. I think you've got to go and buy that book, really. But
Yeah,
if you do have the opportunity to read it, it's worth reading.
it's a
Definitely.
nice little. Yeah, you want. It's not a waste of time. I think it's the thing.
Mhm.
It's if you're in the right mood, if you want a little weird Christmas story in the Warhammer world, in an earlier version of the Warhammer world as well, because it does mention. So this is Prague under King Zoltan. So an earlier sort of iteration of Prague and the conception of how Prague as a city state was. There's a lot of stuff about Kislev in it, but it's also like it's a city state within Kislev. So there's a Tsar and there's King Zoltan, and it kind of ties together. King Zoltan, of course, from earlier lore features in Caleb Dark and that kind of stuff. So there's kind
Mhm.
of that's quite neat as well. In like it's a slightly odd, to us now, it's a slightly odd version of Kislev. It's like a proto Kislev, so that's quite cool. Proto Prague. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's quite neat. I should also mention that as part of, I'm doing a little 12 days of Patreon thing on Patreon, on the Jordan Sorcery Patreon, um, where folks, every single day for those 12 days over the Christmas period, there's something exclusive and new and shiny for folks to enjoy. One of them that's out right now is an interview with David Ferring. So David Garnett, the author who wrote as David Ferring, very generously has answered a few of my questions about his work on Konrad and the sort of working with Games Workshop and GW books and all that kind of stuff. Very nice of him to spend some time doing that. So that's available exclusively at patreon.com/Jordan Sorcery for anybody who wants to go and find out a little bit more about the behind the scenes of Konrad. So we did say that interestingly, the festive season is kind of a little bit like David Ferring channeling some Kim Newman, some Jack Yeovil, who wrote Drachenfels and Beasts in Velvet, and some basically the coolest, the most fun GW books, Warhammer stories, classic Warhammer stories. Sadly, there is not a secret lost Kim Newman, Jack Yeovil Warhammer horror Christmas story. I mean, that would be what a find that would be to get hold of. But there is this Christmas ghost story, or Kim Newman, a Christmas ghost story. This came out in 2024, so this is quite new,
Mhm.
and this is the second book that we read, and I was quite surprised. It is a contemporary ghost story for Christmas, so it's literally set right now. It has everything modern, podcasts and the internet and all sorts of stuff, very much in modern culture, which did surprise me. Kind of, I don't know why. I was just ghost stories for Christmas feel like period things to me. So I went
Yeah.
in and I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. He's doing a Victorian ghost story. And then no, not at all. He's doing a modern ghost story. But very quickly, I found myself quite enjoying this. What was your sort of initial read on it?
Similar, actually, because I didn't bother reading up on it first. I just thought, we're reading this, so I'm going to read it. And it might be the cover, it might be the book sleeve,
Yes, because
because it
it's like a
looks,
letter, right? It looks like a
yeah. So yeah, I thought, oh, yeah, it's going to be Dickens-esque style,
yes,
like a creepy Christmas Carol. Well, Christmas Carol's kind of creepy anyway, but more of a less whimsical version of it. But I enjoyed it straight away. I quite enjoyed the conversational writing style, because it's a little bit different at times to
Mm.
some of his other work.
Yeah,
He reminded me a little bit of Matt Haig, things like the Midnight Library, where
right.
the characters are and sometimes they're talking or thinking out loud, but it had that kind of modern feel to it. Partly like you said, because it's contemporary. But
Mm.
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the conversations and interactions between Angie and Russell, the two characters you pretty much see throughout throughout the book. It it resonates with things
Mm.
as being in a family, being a parent, and while I don't have a teenage child yet, there's things I recognise, and things I think a lot of people recognise about family traditions at Christmas and things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it's a two-hander. It's like a mum and a
Mm.
son who live by design. They live in this quite isolated, like homestead out in a bit of a sort of woodland, off the beaten track. And it's so the ghost story. I mean, I suppose it's probably worth getting into the actual like the catalyst for the kind of ghostly elements. Essentially, they start receiving a daily card, a daily letter, Christmas card, that is increasingly creepy and like uncomfortable, I suppose. The image on the front of the first card is like weird and kind of an odd sort of snowy landscape with like certain things that just don't feel quite right. And then each subsequent card is actually like a progression of the landscape and the events. So you start seeing these creatures start to emerge, and with each day on each card, the creatures start getting closer and closer to the camera. Other weird stuff is happening around the house. That like things are affecting them, like and in themselves, but also the house itself is becoming increasingly isolated. They're getting snowed in. There's weird stuff growing around the base of the walls and all this sort of stuff. So it just kind of is this escalating tension, as you know, because obviously they very quickly are like, oh, these cards are there's something wrong with this. This is like otherworldly. Are we cursed? Is someone, initially is someone playing a trick? Is it a prank? But then
Yeah.
it gets to, is it a curse? Are we being visited in some way? And it sort of progresses further and further along. It's a really good ticking clock because you have the baked
Hmm.
in, like the 24 days up to Christmas Day, a card every single day. There's a little creepy poem in each card that kind of progresses. So, like, even before you get into the really super cool, I think, like the initial revelations of what's going on, it's just an awesome setup.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. It's
Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah, really. And there's loads of kind of, and they make the references to it in the story because it's contemporary. So they'll say that they shouldn't have watched The Grudge, and then that's kind of elements to it. And then the all the things about their characters. So the son has a podcast that's to do with paraphenomena,
Yeah,
basically. So he's into ghosts and things already, but likes to approach it in a quite a scientific way. And it's nice that that adds a layer because he's already got a certain understanding to this, and maybe kind of explains why he reacts quite calmly to this to start with, because he's looking for rational explanations to it.
mm,
And it's his mum that seems to struggle
yes,
first. Mentally, she starts to break down more because there's a connection to what's going on from her
yeah,
past, that she hasn't told him. And again, this is all slowly laid in, and it works incredibly well, I think.
yeah. Yeah, I really love that. And I like all the references, whether it's to like pop culture, that there are
Mm.
loads of movie references. There's references to like the Fontana anthologies of ghost stories and these little book collections, all this kind of cool stuff. So there's all of that, which is great. But then, yeah, exactly like you mentioned there, there's this actual secret that the mum has about the cards. She knows more than she initially lets on. That's why her initial early reaction to it is almost so violent in that she locks herself in the room for like a day because she doesn't want
Mm.
to talk to him and doesn't want to reveal anything. And that's because she has an understanding, sort of where these cards are coming from. And the story behind that I thought was absolutely amazing. I could not get enough of it. So, and huge spoilers for anybody who's going to read this. And I would just highly recommend this as a ghost story. I think it's fantastic, well worth a read. So if you want to read it unspoiled, now's definitely the time to jump off and to leave, pause it, go read it, come back, and we'll continue. But yeah, you get the revelation that as a kid, the mum had sneaking down on Christmas Eve one night when she was just a youngster to watch the BBC ghost story for Christmas that year. I think it was like 1976 or 7, something around there, 1975 maybe. And the ghost story that she saw was to do with this series of haunted cards that are being sent, and there's a load of other stuff, and there's like creepy creatures and demons and wizards and whatever. Um, which is cool, that something from her past is like now affecting her son today, 20, 30 years later. But the extra layer on top of it is that there was no ghost story for Christmas that year. And that's true in the real world, but it's also true in the book's world as well. So when she snuck down as a kid to watch this episode that she then watched and was terrified by and has stayed with her entire life, she's become an author and it's all still there, actually didn't exist. So she's seen something. She's watched a transmission from the other world that she couldn't have seen. Did she dream it? Was it real? Is it connected? Like, it's such a great. I loved it. I was just like, this is cool. This is really smart. It's really creepy. It's really like, it's unnerving and just a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and the setup for it's quite long as well because it's all about her relationships with her peers at school who all pretend that they're allowed to stay up and watch this every year. And why does she always have to go to bed before the watershed? And you get all of these kind of connections that people in the UK will be well aware of
Yeah.
the 9 o'clock watershed and remember the days of being sent to bed and not being able to watch programs and that battle with parents about being able to stay up. And this setup is all there, which I think makes the whole idea when you find out that this story wasn't broadcast, it doesn't exist, even stronger, even more sort of believable in it. It is probably a strange way to describe it, but makes it feel more believable because so much of the backstory is rooted in not just her reality as a child, but also our own as readers, because many of us of a certain generation will have experienced those conversations with parents, or maybe even remember that kind of programming in that period. So I think that's really clever. I'm glad you brought that up because it's one of the strongest parts of the whole story. I think it makes it so creepy.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that stuff as well, like you say, that real world, like it is very nostalgic in a way. It reminds me of I wasn't around in the 70s when these things were first being broadcast, but it reminds me of my own childhood, like the traditions. They talk a lot about their own family traditions and the things they do every year. It does really ground it in reality, a very nostalgic version of Christmas, like a family Christmas that you would have had as a kid or a lot of people will have had, or I certainly was lucky enough to have as a kid. So all of that's present. So you're tapping into that. You're tapping into all these amazing ghost stories. I cannot get enough of the BBC ghost stories for Christmas. I absolutely love them. I watch them every year. Sit down and watch a couple. I love that they've been brought back now. So there's a new one every year, even if they're not all successful as ghost stories. I just love the fact that they exist. I think it's so cool. So like all of that is just ticking boxes for me, left, right, and center. And then the actual, like I say, that the escalation through the course of this story as things are getting closer and closer to Christmas Day. I mean, we know we're going to get to Christmas Day. So you kind of like, there's no expectation that things are going to get cut short, but there is enough of a sense of dread building because there's these really clever ideas of like on the first day Russell eats like what he thinks is a chocolate that's been included in the package, and it like tastes a bit weird, a bit bitter, and then actually turns out that it's not a chocolate, or maybe it could have been a chocolate, but there's something wrong about it. They throw one out of the window, and that is what grows all of the vines that start like entangling the house. And he constantly is thinking about that's inside. I ate one of those. There's one of those
Yeah.
like things inside me. So you're building, and it comes up in lots of different ways over the course of the story, and it's like, okay, is that going to be a thing? You know, is there going to be?
Yeah, because he's slowly becoming more unwell, isn't he?
Yeah,
Because
he
of
is.
it.
Yeah, yeah. And then because you're getting all of the sort of classic, like that I was theorizing throughout it. I'm constantly like, it's so deftly written that it touches on all of the red herrings and the classic tropes and all this sort of stuff. Maybe the boy is dead already. Maybe the mum is dead already. Maybe they're both dead and they're both ghosts talking
Yeah.
to each. There's all of this sort of stuff, and there's like other things. Is one of them hallucinating? Is it something else? Like there's lots of different ways for it to play out. Then you get an actual ghost turns up in the house. A
Hmm.
little girl is and sort of creeps out Russell, and then you get this sort of escalation into the sort of final resolution, the final day. The creatures on the cards are right up there, and then it kind of all breaks into the house and kind of envelops them. Um,
Yeah.
this is where, and I think this is a super hard thing for ghost stories generally. It's often very hard to sort of bring it in for a landing that
Hmm.
is scary and satisfying. And I think you find this a lot, or at least I find this a lot with ghost stories. M.R. James ghost stories, the BBC ghost stories for Christmas, even your Outer Limits and Twilight Zones. These kind of creepy shows. You often find that you have to end it on a bit of a stinger. There has to be like a final twisty resolution, so you walk away. You can't just have a satisfying conclusion to the narrative elements and the drama. Often there's like, oh, but also the hand bursts out of the soil. Like that. It feels like there's often these sort of cheap tricks in order to leave you in that way. So it's really hard to do. I had a few misgivings about the ending at first. I mean, I don't know how did you feel about the sort of resolution of it?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's probably my least favorite part of it. The build-up was fantastic, and I mean, as part of as context to that is so he's obviously seen this ghost, which turns out to almost be a ghost of his mum rather than a real ghost. So that's really really fun into play. We throughout this time we see Magister Rook, so we get these little almost cut scenes taking away to the evil that we presumed is the evil in that we're seeing in the card, which is nice. And he does it. I'm going on tangents here, but he does it in the way Kim Newman does. You'll be rolling away with a couple of characters in the book, and then suddenly, like that, you suddenly taken away to something new, just as you were feeling comfortable with what's going on. He does that a lot in the Warhammer stories, and then you come back again to the characters you're comfortable with. It's sort of, but he gets it right. It's a shock at first, and then like, where are we? And then very soon you're back on track, and you get used to the rhythm. But I think there's lots of things he could have done, and it does a little bit like the last story, comes to an end quite quickly, and rather goes super bleak. There is a sort of a resolution of saving at the end, and I kind of expected actually it not to be like that. I thought it was going to be,
Yeah.
like you said. Turns out one of them's been dead for a while, or something or other, like some really grim twist to it. But maybe because it's a Christmas based, that would have been maybe that's why there's a bit of a happier ending there.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And the longer I've sat with it, because I had that initial reaction, because yeah, there is quite it's sort of a neat ending in that they have to deal with each other and they have to deal with themselves and kind of like there's a it's very much an emotional climax where
Hmm.
it's about confronting yourself and your needs and your wants and expectations and all that sort of stuff. So
Yes.
it's very much an internal thing. and all of the haunting, all of the cards and the creepy stuff is all kind of like this manifestation of one's own internal struggles, which is, that's classic ghost story stuff as well. It all makes sense. It all works perfectly well. It is quite concise. That end bit is quite clipped. It's quite quick. And that was where I was sort of initially like, okay, am I satisfied with this? Did the conclusion come too easily? Did it come too quickly? But the longer I've sat with it and sort of mulled it over, the more and more I thought that I enjoyed the story so much. I enjoyed the build up to it so much that like it's a big win as a story, regardless of how it ultimately ends. Like it kind of doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me too much. But the way in which it ends ties into exactly like you say. It is a Christmas story. It is about coming to terms with yourself and your family and the traditions and the world of Christmas. And
Mhm.
I think it does that well enough that I'm like, you know what? Yes, I'm happy with that ending. I think it works. I think it's good. Sure, is there some mythical like ghost story ending which takes you right up to the scariest ending possible? I'm sure there is. But the reality is that most ghost story endings they go one of two ways. Either you get a neat resolution like this, or you get the big twist, sort of big surprise,
Mhm.
which isn't always a big twist and a surprise because you're expecting a twist or a surprise. So you kind of can't win almost with these kind of
Yeah.
stories. So I'm quite happy that it works as a Christmas story. That's where the Christmas part of the ghost story comes in.
Yeah, and I find both Rustin and Angie incredibly likable characters,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and a lovely relationship as a family. And it would have been a shame to lose that and lose one of them or both of them to this evil. And it's nice that there's a resolution. And there's a whole lot of this story. I think is about getting over I'm guessing the passing of the father a few years beforehand. So a lot of this is nostalgia, looking back at what is the perfect Christmas and
mm,
realizing that they need to grow up and move on in some ways. And nostalgia isn't always good and healthy, and things need to change. A little bit about Rust growing up and becoming a young adult as well, his frustrations with his podcast and things, and her with her writing. And it feels like a lot of the story is about them growing into a new phase of their lives,
yeah,
as well. And I wonder if that's partly what the story's trying to tell. Because there's a lot of them thinking about themselves and their past and their relationships and all of those things.
yeah,
And they do have a lovely relationship and lovely conversations. And some of my favorite parts of the book are the normal parts. I mean, there's other elements that are really weird, almost Stephen King weird, as in they blindly kind of go through the accept their fates of this and continue to put these cards on the shelf and almost like we
yeah.
are gonna deal with it. It's almost like they're resolved to go through with this in a
Mm,
really kind of almost dystopian kind of way, and that feels like the way characters react in King books. Sometimes you know what's going to happen, but they don't act very much like normal people. They are kind of absorbed into whatever doom that they have for them, because it is strange at times, isn't it?
oh yeah.
Gloriously strange, but it is strange.
Yes, it is very much so. There's also a really nice sort of theme around like tradition as ritual and like the sort of totemic elements of Christmas, and whether or
Hmm.
not like by putting on the whatever it is the angel you might put on top of the tree, like that act can be quite powerful and has so much meaning and so much symbolism. It can be like a magic of sorts. For the same reason, there is like these off-brand Transformers figures
Yeah.
that Russell or Rust has, and they are always on the mantelpiece, like defending the house. But at Christmas, they need to go away because that's where the cards go, and that is one of the things that invites the evil in because these totemic
Yeah.
defenders are not there now. So there's like these really nice little, just these like it suggests these really interesting ideas around modern magic and like things like that, and the defenses against evil that we might have in our lives in a sort of
Yes.
weirdly spiritual way. I really liked all that. It kind of gave the world this very interesting texture and was quite nice and effective. Yeah. I, I think I think it was a really. I was not surprised to find myself loving a Kim Newman story, especially a ghost story at Christmas. Like it already had ticked so many boxes that I was just like, yes, this is great. So I was very happy that I wasn't then like there was no sense of disappointment for me, even with that ending where initially I was like, okay, do I like this? I still knew that I loved the story because I'd enjoyed everything before that, like up to that point,
Yes,
and
yeah,
then now
agreed.
sitting with it as quite a mature ending, I'm totally in favor of it.
Yeah, 100%. It's a really nice, easy read, isn't it?
Yeah,
And another one to recommend for
yeah, completely.
for people. It's a novella, so it'll be something that you can blast through this very, very quickly. It's a very easy
Yes,
read.
yeah, and I found myself like initially I was like, oh, I'll just read a chapter here, chapter there. I think by the second time or the third time I was reading it, I was like, right, well, I'm in now. I'm going right the way through to the end. Like it really grabbed
Hmm.
me, and I wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to see what's going to happen when the next card arrives. What's going to happen when the next card arrives. So yeah, I think it's a real win. Really terrific. I think one of the things I've discovered through the GW Book Club is just how much I love Kim Newman's writing. I'm so glad to have finally discovered it, and
Yeah,
I'm anticipating enjoying so much more of his work.
yeah, absolutely. It's on Audible as well, so people are
Oh,
looking for
right.
something to listen to. Over Christmas as well. Maybe while you're walking the dog or peeling sprouts or something like that. I think it's about 5 hours or something like that.
Right.
I read it and then I listened to it as well, and it's well done, well
That's
presented.
brilliant. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, there's another thing I will mention just whilst we're on ghost stories and Christmas, and that is that on the Jordan Sorcery channel on YouTube every year, I do a Warhammer ghost story for Christmas. So this is my humble attempt to sort of live up to the tradition, the BBC Ghost Story for Christmas, or now the Kim Newman Ghost Story for Christmas tradition of telling a ghost story every year around this time. Because I think Christmas is a really fun time for ghost stories, basically, or creepy stories. It just there's something about it. It's a continuation from October. It comes into this dark and yes, it's a joyous time, but it's also a quite scary one. So that's why I like it. And yeah, they are just little Warhammer fan fiction, basically. But I'm working on one for this year. It's called The White Goat. Fingers crossed, it's done in time for Christmas. But I'm going to be publishing that very soon on the Jordan Sorcery channel. And there's going to be a tie-in little RPG scenario thing as well that's going to be available on my Patreon. It's going to be part of that 12 days of Patreon thing I talked about before. And yes, I am very conscious of what I just said before, that ending a ghost story is really hard. So please don't hold it against me. Is there
It
anything
would be
else,
great.
Stu, that you would want to say about either of our little festive treats here, or a Warhammer ghost story for Christmas? Anything about any of it?
Not really. I just to reiterate, they are both worth your time. If you've watched this and you're inspired, you can get hold of them. Definitely, and definitely the Kim Newman one.
Yeah.
And it may be something that other people in your family might like as well. Especially if you like me and the other people in your family don't always like fantasy stories, but might be drawn to something more contemporary. That's something you can maybe share with a loved one as well this time of year.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. And because it's so slight in a good way, you read it, it's thin novella that you read really quickly that has so much like character and sort of feel of the season. It is, I think, a great little, a token gift or to go in a stocking filler, I suppose you might say. But yeah, I
Yes.
think I
Yeah,
would
absolutely.
second both of those points. Well, thank you as ever, Stu, for joining me for this chat, for our little GW Book Club chat. Where can folks find you online if they want to ask you more questions about any of this stuff?
Miniature Realms, where I won't be performing or writing a ghost story this Christmas, but there will be other Warhammer related or Warhammer adjacent content.
I will put all the links in the description below so folks can find you on pretty much every platform, I think, right? Miniature Realms.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'm Jordan Sorcery on pretty much every platform as well. Whether that's your YouTube for your Warhammer Ghost Stories or Patreon or Blue Sky or wherever else. But I think that is a nice, we can tie a bow on that as a nice little festive discussion about a couple of fun little ghostly Christmassy short stories. So, Stu, thank you for being here and for chatting. And thank you everybody else for joining us. Merry Christmas to you all. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.